Close your eyes for just a moment. Take a deep breath and try to remember. Can you smell the intoxicating mix of freshly cut grass, hot driveway asphalt, and sweet coconut sunscreen? Can you hear the distant, tinny melody of an approaching ice cream truck, or the rhythmic clicking of bicycle spokes adorned with playing cards? Welcome back to the 1970s, a decade where summer stretched out endlessly before us, glowing with a special kind of magic that kids today might never truly understand. In this video, we're going completely back in time to explore 20 unforgettable, magical summer rituals from 1970s America that our generation has lost forever. We will journey from the simple joy of drinking from a garden hose to the thrilling freedom of staying out until the streetlights came on. And make sure you stay with us until the very end, because our final memory explores a profound level of neighborhood trust and connection that will surely bring a tear to your eye. Before we dive into these treasured memories, we have to talk about how different the world felt back then. Time simply moved slower. In the 1970s, we were not constantly tethered to digital screens or bombarded by instant notifications. We did not have cell phones to track our every move or social media to compare our summers with the rest of the world. Because of this, waiting was an art form, and patience was a daily practice. We waited for our favorite song on the radio. We waited for a friend to finally walk out onto their porch. And we waited all year for those 3 glorious months of summer break. Some people today might look back and think we were deprived of technology, assuming our lives were somehow poorer for it. But we know the absolute truth. Our lives were incredibly rich. They were richer in physical touch, in genuine, face-to-face laughter, and in the kind of raw, unfiltered experiences that build character. We possessed the true wealth of uninterrupted time and deep, sincere human connection. Let us open the door to the past and step right back into that golden era. Let us begin by remembering the unmistakable sound that sent every kid in the neighborhood running: the ice cream truck. You would hear that tinny, repetitive melody from 3 blocks away, and suddenly, whatever you were doing lost all importance. You would sprint into the house, letting the screen door slam behind you, frantically asking your mother for some spare change. With a handful of silver coins clutched tightly in your sweaty palm, you ran back to the curb, joining the gathering crowd of neighborhood children. The truck was a glorious white box on wheels, and the driver seemed like a magician dispensing joy. Do you remember the sheer agony of trying to decide before it was your turn? Would you get a bomb pop with its distinct red, white, and blue layers that instantly turned your lips blue? Or maybe a creamsicle with that perfect vanilla center? The paper wrapper always felt cold and slightly damp. You would sit on the warm concrete of the curb, trying to eat it fast enough before the July sun melted it all down your hand, leaving your fingers sticky for the rest of the afternoon. It was not just a sweet treat. It was a shared neighborhood event, a daily celebration that brought all of us together on the sidewalk. Now let us recall a ritual that today would probably horrify modern parents, but to us, it was the absolute taste of summer: drinking directly from the garden hose. When you were deep into a game of tag or building a dirt fort, going all the way inside the house for a glass of water felt like an impossible waste of precious playtime. Instead, you would march right up to the side of the house and turn that rusted metal spigot. The first few seconds of water were always scalding hot, baked by the afternoon sun trapped inside the green rubber tubing. You had to wait, letting it run over your dusty toes until the stream finally turned ice cold. Then, you would bend down and take a big gulp. The water tasted heavily of metal, rubber, and pure earth, but it was the most refreshing drink in the entire world. We shared that same hose with our siblings, our neighbors, and sometimes even the family dog, and nobody ever worried about germs or filtered water. It was a badge of honor, a symbol of our self-sufficiency. We were out in the world, living wild and free, and the garden hose was our oasis. It tasted like freedom, like sunshine, and like the simple joy of an uninterrupted childhood afternoon. And speaking of that trusty garden hose, let us talk about how it transformed our front lawns into the ultimate water park. Running through the sprinkler was a cornerstone of a 1970s summer. We did not have fancy backyard pools or expensive splash pads. All we needed was an oscillating metal sprinkler placed strategically in the middle of the grass. You would stand at the edge of the spray zone, your heart racing, waiting for the water to swing your way. When you finally made a run for it, the shock of the freezing well water hitting your sun-baked skin made you shriek with a mixture of shock and sheer delight. Sometimes, if we were lucky, we had a yellow plastic slip-and-slide rolled out on a slide hill. You would take a running start and throw yourself onto the wet plastic, usually ending up sliding completely off the mat and skidding across the freshly cut grass, leaving green stains all over your favorite bathing suit. The grass would turn into a muddy swamp by the end of the day, but our parents rarely complained. Those afternoons were filled with the sound of splashing water, breathless laughter, and the kind of pure, unadulterated fun that did not cost a single penny. Next, we have to talk about the universal clock that governed every child in the 1970s, the streetlights. When summer mornings broke, we were out the door right after a bowl of cereal, and we were told simply to come home when the streetlights came on. We spent our days roaming far and wide, exploring empty lots, walking along railroad tracks, and riding our bicycles miles away from our own streets. We did not have cell phones or GPS tracking. Our parents trusted us to navigate our world, and they trusted the community to keep an eye on us. As the late summer afternoon turned to dusk, the sky would bleed into beautiful shades of purple and orange. We would watch those tall metal poles intensely. The moment that distinct buzzing sound started and the warm orange glow flickered to life, it was an immediate signal. The magic spell of the day was breaking, and you had to pedal your bike as fast as humanly possible to make it to your front porch. The race against the fading light was thrilling. We lost that incredible sense of independence, that unwritten contract of trust between parents and children, where the neighborhood was our playground and the setting sun was our only curfew. As the evening settled in, a new kind of magic emerged in our backyards, one that we patiently waited for every single night. Catching fireflies in a glass mason jar. As soon as the twilight shadows grew long, you would see that first tiny yellowish-green flash hovering above the tall grass. Suddenly, the whole yard was alive with them. We would run around frantically, cupping our hands gently to trap the delicate bugs without hurting them. Our mothers would give us an empty mayonnaise jar, carefully poking holes in the metal lid with a hammer and a large nail so our little captives could breathe. We would drop a handful of grass into the jar, hoping it would make a nice home. Holding that jar in the dark bedroom later that night was like holding a handful of captured stars. They flickered rhythmically, casting a soft, mesmerizing glow on the ceiling. It was a quiet, contemplative ritual. We always unscrewed the lid and let them fly away the next morning, watching them disperse back into the world. It was a profound early lesson in appreciating fleeting beauty, a gentle interaction with nature that required nothing but a jar, a warm summer night, and a sense of wonder. Let us move from the backyard to a weekend tradition that defined family entertainment. Going to the drive-in movie theater. On a Friday night, our parents would dress us in our pajamas, pop a massive brown paper grocery bag full of homemade popcorn, and load us all into the back of the wood-paneled station wagon. We would pull into the gravel lot, the tires crunching loudly as we found the perfect spot facing that gigantic white screen under the stars. Your father would roll down the window and hook the heavy, silver metal speaker onto the glass. The sound was always a little scratchy, crackling with static, but we did not care at all. The air smelled of exhaust fumes, mosquito coils, and buttery popcorn. We would sit on the hood of the car or lay out sleeping bags in the back, fighting to keep our heavy eyelids open during the double feature. More often than not, the gentle rocking of the car and the hypnotic flickering of the screen would lull us to sleep long before the second movie ended. Waking up the next morning in your own bed, having been carried inside by your father, felt like absolute magic. The drive-in was a communal experience, a giant neighborhood living room under the open summer sky. Speaking of things brewing under the summer sky, do you remember the sight of a massive glass pitcher sitting quietly on the back porch? Making sun tea was a daily ritual in millions of American households. It was such a beautifully slow and deliberate process. Our mothers would take that heavy, clear glass gallon jar, fill it to the brim with cold water from the tap, and drape 5 or 6 Lipton tea bags over the rim, letting the paper tags hang on the outside. Then the jar was placed on the sunniest spot of the concrete patio or the wooden deck. We would check on it throughout the day, watching as the clear waters slowly bled into a deep, rich amber color, baked to perfection by the intense heat of the July sun. It felt like a small science experiment happening right in our own backyard. Later in the afternoon, she would bring the warm jar inside, remove the tea bags, and stir in a generous amount of sugar and freshly sliced lemons. Poured over a tall glass overflowing with ice cubes, it was the quintessential taste of a 70s summer. The condensation would drip down the side of the glass as you drank it. It was a testament to the art of waiting, a reminder that the best things in life take time and a little bit of sunshine. Another unforgettable adventure was the sheer thrill of setting up a camp right in your own backyard. Sleeping outside in a canvas tent was a rite of passage. These were not the lightweight, easy-to-assemble nylon tents of today. These were heavy, olive-green canvas structures that smelled faintly of mildew and old rain. Setting it up required a complicated dance of metal poles, wooden stakes, and tying knots while arguing with your brother or best friend. Once it was finally up, we hauled our sleeping bags, a couple of heavy metal flashlights, and a stash of stolen cookies into our temporary sanctuary. As the house went dark, the familiar backyard suddenly transformed into a mysterious wilderness. We would shine our flashlights under our chins, making terrifying faces and telling ghost stories until we scared ourselves half to death. We would listen to the chorus of crickets, the distant barking of a neighborhood dog, and the wind rustling through the oak trees. We rarely slept the whole night. We usually ended up sneaking back into the house by 2 in the morning, defeated by mosquito bites and a lumpy lung. But for those few hours, we were intrepid explorers, braving the great outdoors just a few steps away from our back door. Let us reminisce about a summer currency that held more value to us than actual money: collecting, trading, and organizing baseball cards. A trip to the corner store with 50 cents meant you could buy several wax packs of Topps cards. Opening that waxy paper wrapper was a sensory experience we will never forget. First came the distinctive powdery smell of the cardboard, followed instantly by the scent of that flat, rigid stick of pink bubble gum. You would pop the stale gum into your mouth, chewing furiously until it softened, while carefully flipping through your newly acquired treasures. You memorized the statistics on the back of each card, learning the batting averages and hometowns of heroes you had never even met. We spent countless afternoons sitting cross-legged on the porch, negotiating trades with friends. A favorite pitcher for a power hitter, haggling over the condition of the corners. We kept our collections in old shoe boxes, bound tightly with thick rubber bands. They were our prized possessions, handled with a reverence that borders on the sacred. It was not about financial investments or grading systems back then. It was about pure fandom, a tangible connection to the sport that defined our summer days. And what about the way we traveled around our neighborhoods? Before inline skates or hoverboards, we had the sheer clunky thrill of metal roller skates. These were the kind that did not come with their own shoes. Instead, you had to forcefully clamp them onto your everyday canvas sneakers. You wore a heavy metal key on a string around your neck, a vital tool needed to tighten the skates so they would not fly off while you were moving. Once you got them securely fastened, you would push off onto the uneven concrete sidewalk. The noise was absolutely deafening. The grinding metallic roar of those steel wheels rolling over the pavement echoed down the entire street, alerting every neighbor to your presence. You felt every single crack, bump, and pebble rattling right up through your teeth. We skated for hours, skinning our knees and elbows more times than we could count, but we always got back up. There was a glorious sense of freedom in coasting down a slight hill, the warm wind blowing through our hair, our arms flailing for balance. That simple metal key hanging against our chests was a passport to speed and adventure, an emblem of a rough-and-tumble childhood where a few scraped knees were just part of the fun. Let us turn up the volume on a memory that provided the soundtrack to our entire youth. Listening to the Top 40 Countdown on a portable transistor radio. In the 1970s, music was not something you could instantly stream on demand. It was something you had to patiently wait for. We would carry those rectangular plastic boxes everywhere, from the local public pool to the back porch, extending the long, fragile metal antenna to catch the best possible signal. The sound was incredibly tinny, often fading in and out with a wave of static if you turned your body the wrong way. But when your absolute favorite song finally came on the airwaves, the excitement was unmatched. If you were lucky enough to have a cassette recorder, you would sit in tense silence, hovering your finger over the record and play buttons, trying to capture the song without the disc jockey talking over the introduction. We knew the voices of radio hosts like trusted friends, letting them guide us through the hits of the summer. We bonded over those shared musical moments, singing along to the crackling melodies. That little radio was our precious connection to the wider cultural world, a magical box that brought the greatest voices right into our hands. Now, let us venture into the woods at the edge of the subdivision, or that one overgrown empty lot down the street, where we became master architects. Building forts was not just a game, it was serious summer business. We would scavenge for building materials like it was our full-time job. Old wooden pallets behind the hardware store, discarded sheets of plywood, frayed pieces of rope, and branches dragged from the creek bed. We hauled it all to our secret location and constructed our hideouts. They were usually lopsided, drafty, and highly unstable, but to us, they were magnificent castles. These forts were strictly off-limits to parents and younger siblings. You had to know the secret password to enter, and once inside, you were part of an exclusive club. We would sit on overturned plastic buckets, drinking warm soda, reading comic books, and plotting our neighborhood adventures. It was a profound exercise in independence and imagination. We created a space that was entirely our own, governed by our own rules, away from the watchful eyes of adults. The pride we felt sitting under a leaky roof of scrap wood was immeasurable. We were builders, dreamers, and rulers of our own tiny, hidden kingdoms. When the heat of the afternoon became completely unbearable, we turned to a refreshing ritual that required patience and a little bit of culinary creativity. Making homemade popsicles in those colorful plastic molds. Every mother seemed to have that same set, usually holding 6 slightly curved, ribbed shapes with brightly colored, sticky plastic handles. The recipe was beautifully simple. You would mix up a massive pitcher of cherry or grape Kool-Aid, heavily sweetened with what felt like a pound of sugar, or perhaps pour in some leftover orange juice. Carefully, trying not to spill, you would fill the molds and snap the plastic sticks into place. Then came the hardest part, the waiting. You would open the heavy freezer door every 20 minutes to check if they were solid yet, only to find them still sloshing around in the icy air. When they finally froze solid, getting them out of the mold was a tricky maneuver, usually requiring you to run the plastic under warm water from the sink until the popsicle slipped free. Eating them on the front steps, trying to suck all the sweet flavor out before it turned into clear ice, is a memory that tastes exactly like a long, lazy summer afternoon. Let us buckle up and remember the ultimate test of family endurance. The great American road trip in the station wagon with absolutely no air conditioning. When vacation time rolled around, our parents would pack the back of that massive wood-paneled boat on wheels with suitcases, coolers, and an array of restless children. We did not have personal screens, tablets, or even headphones. We had each other, a deck of cards, and miles of open highway. You remember the searing pain of sliding onto those scorching hot vinyl seats while wearing summer shorts. To survive the sweltering heat, all the heavy windows were rolled all the way down, creating a deafening roar of wind that made conversation nearly impossible. We played endless games of I Spy and the license plate game, fighting fiercely with our siblings over an invisible line drawn down the middle of the back seat. Our fathers navigated using massive, impossibly folded paper maps, refusing to stop and ask for directions. It was hot, it was cramped, and it was chaotic, but it was also a profound bonding experience. We were a captive audience to the changing landscapes of the country, sharing an unforgettable journey that made arriving at the destination feel like a true victory. As the heat of the day broke and the shadows lengthened, the neighborhood transformed into a vast, complex game board. Playing massive games of hide-and-seek or kick-the-can in the twilight hours was a ritual we lived for. The rules were passed down from older siblings to younger ones, like sacred texts. One person would lean against a designated home base, usually a large oak tree or a telephone pole, cover their eyes, and count loudly to 50. The rest of us would scatter frantically in every direction. We knew every single hiding spot on the block. The thick azalea bushes in Mrs. Miller's yard, the dark space behind a parked station wagon, or the shadowy corner of a detached garage. You would crouch there in the humid evening air, your heart pounding loudly in your chest, trying to silence your own breathing. The thrill of making a mad, sprinting dash toward home base, screaming at the top of your lungs while hoping not to get tagged, was an adrenaline rush like no other. It was a game that blurred the property lines of our neighborhood, uniting kids of all ages in a shared pursuit of stealth and speed, playing fiercely until the very last bit of sunlight disappeared from the horizon. Toward the very end of summer, a specific heavy object would arrive in the mail, signaling the transition of the seasons and sparking wild dreams. The arrival of the Sears Wish Book or the J.C. Penney catalog. Although often associated with the holidays, these massive catalogs started arriving in late summer, and they were the most fascinating literature a child could get their hands on. We would drag that thick, heavy book onto the living room rug and lie on our stomachs for hours. The pages smelled intensely of fresh ink and glossy paper. We would flip straight to the toy section, completely ignoring the pages of sensible school clothes or home appliances. Armed with a thick marker or a brightly colored pen, we would carefully circle the things we desperately wanted, dog-earing the pages for our parents to see. We imagined zooming down the driveway on a new big wheel or setting up a massive electric train track in the basement. It was a glorious exercise in pure longing and imagination. We did not get everything we circled, of course, but the act of looking, of dreaming about the possibilities contained within those hundreds of pages, was a deeply satisfying ritual that defined the end of our summer days. Let us take a moment to smell the intoxicating mixture of chlorine, wet concrete, and coconut-scented Coppertone sunscreen. Going to the municipal community pool was the ultimate social event of the week. You packed your rolled-up towel and a few coins, and rode your bike to the chain-link fence that surrounded the splashing oasis. The noise was a continuous, joyful roar of shouting, splashing, and the rhythmic bouncing of the diving board. We spent hours playing endless rounds of Marco Polo, swimming with our eyes tightly shut until our fingers grew heavily wrinkled like raisins. We dared each other to jump off the high dive, standing on the edge of the rough fiberglass board, terrified but determined not to lose face in front of our friends. When our energy finally dipped, we would line up at the cinder block concession stand, our teeth chattering despite the heat, clutching wet coins to buy a frozen Milky Way bar or a small paper cup of salty French fries. We laid our towels out on the blistering hot concrete to dry off, soaking in the sun. The community pool was our grand summer stage, a place where friendships were forged in the deep end, and every afternoon felt like a bustling, joyful festival. There was another summer tradition that required us to venture just a little bit further from our manicured lawns. Picking wild blackberries or strawberries along the dusty country roads or at the edges of the woods. Our mothers would hand us an old plastic bucket or a washed-out coffee can and send us off into the humid morning air. We knew exactly where the best unpicked bushes grew, usually hidden behind thick layers of thorny vines. We would carefully reach into the brambles, suffering dozens of small scratches on our arms and legs to reach the plumpest, darkest berries. Half of what we picked never even made it into the bucket. We would pop the sun-warmed, incredibly sweet fruit straight into our mouths, our fingers and lips stained a deep, telltale purple by the end of the morning. When we finally brought our modest harvest back home, our mother would wash them in the sink and transform them into a bubbling, sugary cobbler or a fresh pie. Eating a warm slice of blackberry pie with a scoop of melting vanilla ice cream that evening was a triumphant feeling. It was a sweet reward for our hard work, a delicious communion with the wild, untamed edges of our suburban world. Now, let us recall a Saturday morning chore that we actually looked forward to, turning domestic labor into a neighborhood water fight, washing the massive family car out in the driveway. The cars of the 1970s were absolute behemoths of steel and chrome, requiring a serious amount of elbow grease to get them shining. Your father would pull the car out of the garage, attach the hose, and fill a bright plastic bucket with soapy water, usually using whatever dish soap was sitting by the kitchen sink. Armed with large yellow sponges, we would scrub the massive hoods and polish the shining silver hubcaps. The soap suds would slide down the windshield, creating rainbows in the morning sunlight. Inevitably, the chore would devolve into a full-blown water war. Someone would purposefully turn the hose on their brother, and chaos would ensue, leaving everyone completely drenched and laughing hysterically. Afterward, we would dry the car with old, soft cotton t-shirts, standing back to admire the gleaming machine baking in the driveway. It was a proud, shared accomplishment, a moment of family teamwork that taught us the value of taking care of our things while still allowing for a little bit of messy, joyful rebellion. Finally, let us talk about a ritual that symbolizes the profound level of trust and community we have seemingly lost forever. The unspoken rule of leaving the front screen door wide open. In those days, before the heavy prevalence of central air conditioning, letting the breeze flow through the house was a necessity, but it was also a powerful statement of openness. You could walk down any street in America and hear that distinctive high-pitched squeak of a screen door spring stretching, followed by a loud wooden slam as kids ran in and out. We never bothered knocking on our friends' doors. We would just press our faces against the dark wire mesh, cup our hands around our eyes, and yell out to see if anyone was home. Neighbors would casually step onto the porch and talk through the screen, sharing gossip or asking to borrow a cup of sugar. We lived with our doors open to the world. It represented a time when we knew everyone on our block, when we trusted our community, and when the boundary between the private home and the public neighborhood was wonderfully blurred. The slam of a screen door is the very heartbeat of a 70s summer, a sound that echoes with the comfort, safety, and profound connection of our shared youth. As we look back at all these beautiful memories, it becomes incredibly clear. We do not just miss the old metal roller skates, the heavy canvas tents, or the waxy baseball cards. What we truly miss is the way we felt when we held them. We long for that profound sense of safety, that feeling of boundless time, and the deep, unspoken connection we shared with our neighbors, our friends, and our families. We miss a time when life felt a little simpler, when our imaginations were our greatest tools, and when a summer day held infinite, unscripted possibilities. Thank you so much for taking this nostalgic journey with me today. If these memories warmed your heart, please gently tap that like button and subscribe to the channel, so we can keep sharing these beautiful pieces of our history together. Now, I have a question for you. Which of these 20 rituals was your absolute favorite? Or is there a special summer memory from your own childhood that I missed? Please, pour yourself a cup of coffee and share your personal story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I cannot wait to hear from you.